have so you're not encumbered by the policy-making process in terms of, where you want to allow your advertising. But yes, but it should be done, it should be designated. This is the space I have to sell. And this is for commercial products and services. If you want to sell advertising space, and you want to limit it to messages that are, say, you want to exclude messages that are really inappropriate for school property. This is the way to do it. But if you don't do that, you're just basically opening yourself up to everything from everything to everything you can think of.
So, Frank, hearing that and thinking back what we were talking about, if we change the language up here a little bit to indicate that there will be a board-approved list of areas to advertise in, right? Going with some of the language changes, and then talking back here about where do the funds go, and okay, you got the Title IX and everything. Then this seems to clear that up. And the biggest thing is going to be for the administrators to go out and look in each of their buildings, or on the buses, in the buildings, and I start to identify what do they believe is acceptable as the areas and the space and everything that should be advertised.
I agree. I think what should happen, Ms. Ellison, if you're in agreement, is for next committee meeting, we should be able to get a recommendation of spaces from the administration, and also try to find other districts. They don't have to be Lehigh Valley districts, but other districts that maybe are doing that.
I hear what you're saying. We had a whole packet that was given to us. I don't have the date of when this was given to us, but it was almost a year ago. And it was policy 913.1 and 707.2 in conjunction. So we have several schools. I have several schools. I saved them.
Is that the stuff that we're giving?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if we could just have that for next month's committee meeting, with a list of recommended advertising sites within the district, I think from there we're
Yeah, what I could do is, I think we need to amend the language to reflect some of those concerns.
We're not losing you.
No, you didn't.
The motion's over.
No, I'm not sure.
Amend the language is one thing, okay. And you want a comparative of other school
Well, I'm
districts
just
and
bringing
what
it up
they're...
because I know it came up tonight. But most importantly, I think, like Bob said, have the administration identify where we can advertise.
And Frank, when you were saying compared to other school districts, you were saying compared to other school districts where they're doing advertising in the district, not other school district policies.
No. Advertising.
Right.
Yeah, so in other words, when they go out to the high school...
Locations that there was advertising.
Right, so in other words, when Mr. Cook walks down the hallways, he's going to say, this bank of lockers, this wall is going to be areas that we can advertise on. And from a comparison point, he can call up Parkland and say, what have you done on your walls?
Right,
what have you done on your lockers?
Or buses, districts that advertise on buses. Again, get from them, hear what they did. Is there districts out here that are advertising on lockers, that have advertising on lockers?
You can do a simple search online, because I just did one, and you see stuff with it all on lockers, like a big ad taking up a bank of lockers.
Yeah, we found a few of those here.
But we'll take it out. We can do it.
That's what I'm saying. Coke and that.
It's the sense of the
like a
committee
big rule.
that this policy should be limited to the commercial space that the district is selling and not pertain to various student activities.
Yeah, forget the athletic areas, forget the booklets they do and the programs they do and everything else.
You're talking about facility.
Right, it's going to be you get that list that the administrators put together, and so you have the policy that references the list, and that's the area. And then when Mike turns around and brings companies in, you can interview, you can do the RFP for what is going to be the percentage that they want to take as their commission, and this is the area that they have to sell.
So we're asking administration / our solicitor, him to work on the language, is that what you're saying? And the administration to be able to give an identification of what facilities within the district that they're utilizing.
It wouldn't be for us
commercial.
to say, Mr. Cobb, we're going to advertise here in your building. So we'll let him tell us where he thinks we can advertise that.
So,
Administration.
okay.
I would think, though, it would be valuable to have at least one or two board members involved in that. I think that would be of benefit to everybody. We go around and look. I'd like to have board input on that.
Well, I'd want
Yeah.
to see the whole thing anyway. I mean, you bring it back here, but at least he walks around and he starts to identify what he thinks are the probable areas.
Well, so are we asking for something to come back to the next committee meeting?
Yes.
Just so okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we're saying that we'd like to have a couple board members involved in this process of
That's
bringing information back.
Just my opinion.
Okay.
I would ask
Physically
for that.
looking at spaces.
Take some pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I
Okay,
think
so
that's-
somebody needs to take the lead and,
Right there it is.
as far as school board members here, that you will join forces with the superintendent to go and look at the facilities and identify.
I think it's going to be double effort, but that's okay if that's what he wants. Double effort being because when they come next to the next board meeting, or the committee meeting, they should have pictures of all the areas they plan to advertise on and show us that in the school. That'll be part of a presentation. Hate to say it, Mike, you just have the largest building.
I'll check with you.
Can I ask one more person, if you will, or group to speak?
Thank you.
Mr. Cup, would you be able to,
Getting my iPhone ready for the pictures.
would you be able to maybe speak to the student council? Tell them what we're talking about as far as in the schools and the buses we're looking at, and let them see what they think. And maybe the student president can come, well, they come anyway that meeting the next week, or no, they don't come to the committee.
They
But if
come
we
to
can have
the
a student
regular.
president or a representative and give us their thoughts, since they're the students in the school, and we should, from the high school at least, we should be able to hear from them.
Sure.
Too many times we do things that we think is best for the student, we don't ever hear from them, so I think
You want them to be part of this report at the next committee meeting?
yeah, I think it'd be good just to hear what they think about advertising, and, because John brought up, Mr. Reinhardt, pardon me, brought up the point of students have mentioned to him in the past, and came up to him in the past about being subject to certain things, this and that, and I just feel, we're not gonna be looking at it every day. We're hearing from the administration, let's hear from some of the students as well, let's get their point of view.
Okay. All
I'll
right.
form a subcommittee from the student council. We meet this month. I'll take volunteers. We'll sit them in a room. We'll have a conversation. We'll have something to report out at the next committee meeting.
We should have a boatload of volunteers. Got a site visit all over.
You might. You might, Mr. Penrose. We'll see what the group brings to the table. We haven't had our first, student council meeting. But then you're asking for the next committee meeting. So when we go to the student council, we'll form a subcommittee. I'll have sign-ups. We'll meet with those youngsters, and then in October's meeting, I'll have a representative come to present. Maybe it'll be more than one. It's a great learning experience for them.
And from hearing from them, it's a great learning experience for us.
Sure.
All right, so any more questions?
Are you finishing up my
I'm sorry, I forgot I'm
meeting?
on buildings and grounds. I forgot I passed it back already. No, that's you.
No, I'll just say, okay, so we're going to move back to the committee for A, 300, 400, 500 consolidation, and have a report about what districts are doing and if any have employed PSBA. And then B, 707.1, we're going to continue a discussion regarding that. And 707.2, our solicitor is going to firm up language within the policy. We're going to have the superintendent and possible school board members come and back to report at the next committee meeting, and students. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I think it wasn't done intentionally, we were all over the place. But I think we should hear public comment on the agenda item before we decide what we're doing. And that's what we usually
Okay.
do, but we just messed up this time, that's all.
Oh, I am summarizing, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right, we just, we're all over the place.
I just felt that it's 9:15.
Yeah. Season of Mayor, Sons of Anarchy.
I just thought we'd move this on, and okay. Would there be any public to be heard on policy agenda items? Yes.
Good evening, everybody. I haven't seen this board. My name is Hubert Etchison, and many of you I have not seen. Some of you I have seen. It was nice to see you again. The one thing I wanted to speak to, though, was my initial interactions with the Eastern Area School District had to do with being on an ad hoc committee some 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember how long ago it was. We had gone through and looked at recommendations in terms of advertising revenue as a revenue stream for addressing some of the budget challenges that we were facing at that point. I happen to have a very deep background in advertising. I worked in advertising agencies in New York for 15 years and saw so many programs come and go trying to reach into schools either through video means or through billboard means or through poster means or through all kinds of creative ways of putting messages in front of children. And so I find it, you guys are on the right track in terms of thinking about where precisely these things would go. You do get into a very dangerous area, though, because the second you start opening up things like stadiums and looking at what is a reasonable thing to do, which is to have a outside source bid to start helping in terms of getting people to advertise, is the second you start having massive digital billboards sitting on top of Cottingham Stadium and start dealing with people who have all kinds of issues with the digital light that is and noise that is projected off of those sorts of things. You run into a situation where you could end up with, I hate to bring it up, Trojan wanting to advertise condoms in the school. It's technically a commercial product. How are you going to word that? It gets a little bit dicey when you start looking at the advertising dollar and how hungry they will be. What are you going to do when Fruit Loops wants to advertise in your cafeteria? What are you and there are all the recommendations that are coming down from nutritional boards. We're trying to educate kids to get rid of obesity problems. What are you going to do when you have that? It's a commercial use. It's a very slippery slope, and it will be helpful in terms of taking a look at what other schools are doing to see how they're dealing with it. I completely appreciate it because anything that can help relieve the budget pressure is a good thing. But when you start getting into advertising, what if I form a corporation that sells I Heart Booby bracelets? Right? Then how am I going to get around that? I'm just saying. It's as a person who's worked in advertising, and trust me, I've worked on just about everything you can think of from an advertising standpoint. When you start running ads, to write that policy, you're going to have to write that policy very tightly and have some sort of a review board that has good legal input as you're going through and making an evaluation of those ads, because it can get really sticky, and you will be shocked how many people will be clamoring to put messages in front of children. So I just want to throw that out.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
that.
Thank you.
Nice advice.
Very insightful. Thank you.
Okay, so I gave my little synopsis. You can move on.
All right, we're going to go back to buildings and grounds. And for Mr. Etchison, to answer your question, if you open a corporation for I Heart Movies, they are allowed in the district.
Fully protected.
Got that part.
Yeah.
Letter D is the update on energy savings project that it's been a long time. It seems like forever when I brought it up. I'm sorry, I don't have my laptop, my phone. Everything's on my phone, so I'm going through pull my notes up. But it was about 2 years ago that I brought up looking at an energy savings plan. And we've talked about it, we've done this, we've done that. We're at the point now where, if you remember, we send out the RFPs, 3 companies came back, and myself, Mr. Simonetta, our engineering firm sat down and discussed it, and there was one company that stood out. Everybody was pretty much even on savings and different things, but on other things that could be achieved by going with this company, they stood out, and we felt confident in looking to move forward, as we do feel confident. Again, I wanted to mention basically what it is under the Rendell administration, I believe it was, he put together this ESCO, energy savings companies, where he vetted companies that had strong enough balance sheets to guarantee their savings. So they do audits, what we approved to have the RFPs, they come in and do audits. They do audits, they give us a guaranteed savings. It's in contract form. And if they do not, for some reason, if the energy is not realized in those savings, they're on the hook to write us a check for the difference. By state law and what would be in contract, their guaranteed savings must, at the very minimum, cover our bond payments. So at the end of the day, essentially, we're getting a lot of work done free of charge to us. So we agreed on a company with Constellations. We agreed to bring to you guys. And Constellations has worked with numerous schools in Pennsylvania. They have done Parkland School District. They've done the airport, City of Bethlehem, City of Easton, and they just finished, I want to say, a $15 million project, really close to us.
Indiana area school.
Indiana Area School District. They did a $50 million project. Now, when the companies went out and looked at all of our facilities and came back, when we sat with Dewey, Josh, and Reef, and Mike, we realized that some buildings we might not have, once the report comes back. So we went through and we picked the buildings that we're certain that we would have, the high school, for example, and other buildings. The next step, and I'm going to let them give you some more information, but the next step is to have an investment grade audit done, where they're going to go through, I think they brought a copy, but I'm told it's about this big. They take a month or two to really go through and just go through our bills, go through our everything. The cost of that is not to exceed, their offer is not to exceed $24,400. Now, if we decide for some reason when they come back with their findings and we say for some reason, no, we don't want to do it, we're on the hook for $24,400. If we say yes, we do it, that's rolled in to the cost of the project. Again, in my opinion, and we'll hear more, I don't know why we wouldn't. At the end of the day, we're getting work done for free. There's also different bond companies that we're looking at, but that we can look at that are qualified zone academy bonds that include energy. So because we're doing energy, we can get a better rate than our normal lender would give us. You'll hear tonight that there's an educational component to it, where they call it taking it from the boiler room to the classroom. They will agree to hire local people from our community to do a lot of the work. Same people that pay taxes here will now have a chance to make money with the district as well. So there's a lot of positives, and I don't want to go any further. I'd like to ask Constellation to please come up and speak a little bit.
So thank you for the time this evening, and we'll try to keep this brief, but to provide an overview to the board relative to the next step in this opportunity. So we had an opportunity to come through your facilities and respond to the procurement that was initiated. We were excited to find that there's opportunity for facility renewal or infrastructure upgrade. Based on our initial calculations, we see about $300,000 a year in annual savings. That's in your utility budgets today, but today going out to the utilities. So if you think about electric and gas, you're spending those dollars today. Mr. Simonetta, through his 2600 account, is paying the utility bills. The value we bring to the district is we're going to show you a way to integrate technology to stop some of those dollars going out to the utility companies and allow you to reinvest them to upgrade your infrastructure within the facilities. As Mr. Pinnabone had mentioned, we are leveraging legislation within the Commonwealth. Today it's Act 39. Act 39 gives governmental entities the ability to implement these types of projects. So that's the legislation that we would utilize. Also, as part of that legislation, it's a guaranteed savings. So if we take a calculation and say that the district is going to reduce their energy consumption by X, and X is not achieved, we are responsible by statute, by legislation, to make up that financial difference in that savings. So it's a safety net, if you will, for school districts to make sure that you're not making an investment and don't see the return. Second is the educational component. Mr. Pinnabone had mentioned from the boiler room to the classroom. I like to take it one step further. I think it's boiler room, classroom, living room. And if we can close the loop around energy, I think a lot of students today hear about the green economy. There's a lot of things going on in energy in Pennsylvania, but they step back and are not sure what that is. And so we have some programs that we've built internally to Constellation, and we have others that we partner. So we partner with an organization, the NEED organization. The NEED organization rolls curriculum out to school districts. They're approved by the Commonwealth with some of their educational curriculum. So we have a kind of a dual approach. We do things as simple as, if we're fortunate to implement a project here, we would come to administration, come to the board to say, let's run a logo contest. And maybe we run a logo contest at the K through 5 level, middle school, and then high school. And really, as we're doing work in those facilities, brand that work with energy conservation. So we've run a kind of a contest or an initiative for the students. Earth Day is a day that pops up every year. So how can we help you support Earth Day? So we're very passionate about what we do, and quite frankly, what you do as a board, and taking this step and making sure that visibility is there relative to this initiative. Also, the local community. I look at this as an element of a built-in stimulus. It provides an opportunity to generate infrastructure improvements and renewals without having to raise taxes or without having to cut services. These are dollars that are in your 2600 account today, and we're going to show you how to capture them. So the message to the community is, here's an opportunity to generate, at high level, we see a project roughly in the $5 million range. As Mr. Pinnabone mentioned, we're going to come in and do an investment grade audit, so we'll know exactly what that project scope looks like. But our philosophy is to go to the local community first. So we're going to go to the city of Easton first, and we're going to say, are there qualified contractors who can do this work? And we're going to sit down and work with them to develop scopes of work and have them participate in the project. If we can't find that pool within the city, we'll go to the county. We'll go to the valley. So that's really our approach, to try to keep this as local as possible. We're not real big fans of bringing contractors in from out of state. We want to try to keep it as local as possible. And the last piece, I mentioned 2600 account, but I think that the big piece is it is a budget neutral transaction. So for you as a school district, these are dollars that are being budgeted today that would be budgeted into the future, and that saving stream will be leveraged to fund the infrastructure renewal within the facilities. So with that, Mr. Pinnabone.
I spoke about 24/4 to do the investment grade audit at the buildings that we gave them. I will say for all the buildings, it came out to it will not exceed 40,000. Obviously, we weren't doing all the buildings, but what Constellation, in talking, what they have agreed to do is they're going to do their full-blown audit on the buildings that we chose. But they will stick their heads in and do a mini audit, if you will, in the other buildings. So when it's all said and done, if we decide to keep certain buildings that are not on the list, we won't have to go back and do another investment grade audit and all that again. They have an idea of what the other buildings are if we decide to throw them in with the package. So phase 2, I believe we talked about. There could be a phase 2 if we decide to go that route. So they dropped it down to 23, but they're willing to go in all the buildings at no additional cost to us to update it. When we say all the buildings, the field house down at Cottingham Stadium, in the pool area, pretty much everything there. So first thing, before I keep going on, I just want to know, does anybody have questions from the board?
Yes, which buildings?
You have one?
Will you be getting a document out to us at some point then? Or?
Yes. Currently, we have have the high school, and with the high school, we're looking at, do you have enough to pass on? I do. Probably would have been easier if we did that from the beginning, right?
Yep.
I didn't think Bob was going to ask the question.
You're holding
Come
out.
on, Fred.
I didn't
You're holding
I didn't know
out.
Bob was going to ask the
You
question.
don't know Bob too well.
Free first.
I think that's what you want to go to is look at. The tear-down version. This is with the buildings that we picked, so you won't see all the buildings in here. And, Larry, if you could do me a favor, the ECM 12, the plug load power management, that's the entire district.
That's correct.
So that's something that's going to be through with the entire district. And then we have the
Field
field
house.
house, the envelope, and the lighting. One thing about the lighting, I know it came up with us. Are you just going to change light bulbs? Are you just going to, do the basic thing and leave them alone? Talking to Arif, he said he's seen where it was done before, where the shells were left and the lenses were dirty and things. They just changed the light bulb and said, we did your lighting. It would provide some savings, but it still looked a mess. And then we would have to go in and do that. And we on a conference call yesterday with all of us, we called them to question that. And what Arif and or Josh would do is actually go around with them and identify the ones that need the new lenses, the new shells and things, and they would replace them as well with the lighting. So not only will it be energy savings for us, but it'll also look better as well when people come through our buildings. So that's what the lighting is. The envelope is just the outside of the buildings, around the buildings and things. So we have the field house, the high school, March, no, that's not March, what's that mean? The maintenance building, the middle school, Shawnee, Tracy, and Pat's at the end with the lighting.
Well, and I'll throw up, when it comes to lighting, I've been very involved with some outfits on how they do lighting and what they do and everything. And some of their savings comes in by reducing, in other words, I hate to hear this when they tell you, and that is, well, it's so many candles. I think, Josh, you can talk to Arif sometime about that. We've gone around on this, and it's so many candles. I want to hear, let's go in and measure. I'll tell you, take the measure. You can tell us in here, this room may be too bright, right? So all of a sudden, their answer to get the savings is, we change out the bulbs and everything, and we have less light in here. It's no longer as bright. But that doesn't accomplish it. Let's maintain the same level. So when we walk back through with our meters, we say, yep, whatever candles it was today, it's those many candles tomorrow. And now let's see if we really get the savings. And I think that's one concern I'll throw at you for later.
Absolutely.
As you talked about the $300,000 in savings,
But do you want to?
the 300 is on this.
Just let them answer them as you.
No, I think
instead of
it's.
having to memorize all of them.
Oh, okay.
Testing my memory. So it's a great point, and one of the things that will happen during the investment grade audit, and I have Kent Hughes with me who will handle the technical side of this, so I'll let him add to this as well. But as part of the investment grade audit, we're going to go through and actually do the meter readings that you're speaking of. So not only are we going to look at a fixture and clamp a fixture or a circuit to see what the draw of that circuit is, so we know a pre versus a post, so you know the savings. But we're also going to take desktop readings. And so we're going to put a light meter down at the desktop level to make sure that we know the lumens at that level and make sure they align with code, because there's some very clear code relative to illumination within classrooms. And so the idea is to make sure as our lighting experts go through, we're capturing it. If we find areas that are underlit, we may come back and have a discussion to say, look, we've noticed these 4 rooms that are underlit, let's have that.
No, that's not the issue. The issue is overlit. When it's overlit, and you talked about the regulations, what they have done in places, and I've watched this happen, they cut it down to reduce it, and they say, we met the regulations. Is that what you do?
No, our goal is to try to maximize the light output. If there are areas that you feel need, I'll give you the lumen rating, and we'll say, here's where it is. If the board feels you want to maintain that, then that's what we're going to do. Now, could the savings be reduced? Absolutely.
Right.
But in full transparency, we'll give you both and allow you to make that decision.
Because I'll tell you what, if that comes down that we're going to do that, Frank, I'd love to spend probably 2 days walking around helping to do those readings. Because I know how long it takes if you really go through the rooms and you look at all the areas and everything, and you put down the meters and you record it. That is a super important thing. I worked with a company one time, they actually ended up putting all the fixtures in. They didn't listen to these words. They ate those words later because at their cost, they had to rip everything out and redo it to make it work, because they didn't pay attention to the readings.
And I don't think there would be
So-
a problem with anybody.
Oh, absolutely
tagging
not.
along. I mean, Bob,
Okay.
you want to leave that absence from work, we'll give you a hard hat.
Not a problem. I got the time coming up.
No, but I
So-
think that'll be fine. I think that's beneficial for us.
So, I mean, that is a big thing, and then making sure that it, works accordingly. Your 300,000 savings, that's annual savings?
That's it, yes.
And is that only on these projects right here?
That's correct.
And $5 million is only for these projects right here?
That's correct.
Okay. And when you do your measurements for the savings, are the savings based on total of this project or total per each facility?
The energy savings is the total of the project as a whole.
So in other words, if we cheat in one area, we may pick it up in another area, is what you're saying?
Absolutely. So if there's a shortfall on, we'll call them energy conservation measures, and we gain it on another, then as long as that we're whole for the 314,000, at the end of, we call it the performance period, okay, then we're whole. If we're below that as a project, then that's when we would cut you a check. But that's a good question, because you do tend to overperform on some ECMs, and then you're a little shy on them.
Well, and I'd get into why, and I'd look at also percentages to say, look, if we've missed it on certain areas by that much, it really didn't pay us that we did it, and it shouldn't have been included in the project, and therefore we ought to have additional, there should be some ramifications for that.
Sure.
I think I want to go through more of this stuff, but, I mean, that's just hitting some of the obvious ones to begin with.
Sure. And just real quick on the 314, so as Mr. Pinto mentioned, the aggregate savings is what we have to achieve per legislation. So that 314, let's say off of the sheet, I don't have the updated one in front of me, I'm looking at this sheet here. That aggregate savings, that has to be achieved to meet the debt service for the district. So that's what's required to meet the debt service. We will do individual measurement verification protocols by measures. So we are going to say that, for instance, if we did a boiler, we'd want to know the savings associated with that boiler. It will all roll up into the aggregate, but we are going to have to measure individual measures, if you will, to make sure the savings is being achieved.
And if you look at the proposal, there's two things that really address that. One is the M&V plan, so there's a measurement verification plan that's included in this preliminary proposal, and also there's a commissioning plan, where it talks about how we're going to commission each one of these ECMs. And in the commissioning plan, we're actually going out in the field and physically taking those measurements that you're discussing.
Okay. Since you talked about the debt service, what are the rates that we're looking at, Mike?
Well, it varies. I mean, as we've been refinancing, our bond rating is still AA2.
Okay, but, no, wait, Frank was saying that, better rates than what we normally get because of
Well,
what?
there's different types of bonding we can do for this project.
Okay.
It should be better than what we're at our AA2.
Okay,
And what they would do is also, they would sit with our bond counsel first and hash all that out and do all that work to ensure that we get the best rate.
I think that what we've seen in the industry is when we have the opportunity to sit with bond counsel and explain the mechanism and how the savings is going to be generated, because in traditional bond financing, most lenders are saying, okay, we're lending you dollars, I need to see a revenue offset. It either needs to be, I need to see increased revenue, or I need to see, some reduction in services.
Yeah.
How are you going to pay for the debt service? When we're able to sit with them and quantify where the savings is coming from, and then we're putting our balance sheet behind it to say we're going to guarantee it if it isn't achieved, all of a sudden lenders get very comfortable with that. The second piece is there are vehicles out there. So at the county level, if you remember many years ago, dollars came into the Commonwealth. Those dollars got pushed down to some counties. So you heard some things called qualified energy conservation bonds. It allowed counties to borrow at kind of a blended rate, which was below market. Something that's specific to education is something called a qualified zone academy bond, which Mr. Pinamo had mentioned. There's some traps you have to run through that, so sitting with bond counsel is the right way to do that, to at least open that dialogue. May fit here, may not fit here, but it's definitely worth exploring to make sure it fits. And if it does, talk about what it would take to bring that forward.
Yeah, and for this proposal, we were given a 5% interest rate for the economic model that was provided to us. It's very conservative, so everything that you see here cash flows out, budget neutral at a 5% rate, which I think we could all agree we could do better than that.
Yes, the next question I'd ask is, depending on where we are and what rates we have, and knowing that we have some money sitting in the bank that doesn't earn a lot right now in some cases, it may pay for us to finance $5 million ourselves, and depending what we're paying versus, that's almost an earnings that we get back then.
Well, that's something we discussed, and that's something we could do by funding it ourselves, but that money's going out. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? As opposed to sitting there for us to have if we need it, we're putting it out. So that's something we have to consider as well.
But we're just paying ourselves back in a way,
Yeah, right.
at a lesser rate,
So
so
don't-
we'll make more.
So I mean, that would be where we would go is look at the rates and things, and see, if it's beneficial. And again, there's more steps to this. This is the
Yeah.
last step, and then we go do work. There's more steps. The bond rating, the bond and how we finance it would be another step. So we're all going to be included on discussing that.
But I assume you are going to want to be moving again towards an approval to move ahead, which would be the potential costing at least 24.4.
The cap would be 24.4. Now, if they do, and do you have a?
Yeah, so just
To
to walk
show-
you through the process, because I think that's very important, because I think people really get lost in the process because they haven't been through this type of project. You're usually used to like a plans and spec type of thing. And this is a design-build project, energy savings plan. And what we provided, so everybody understands, this proposal that we have now is just a preliminary audit, okay? Level 1 audit. We went through the buildings maybe a day, possibly 2 days, brought in some local contractors to help us with the pricing. But again, this is just step 1. Step 2, which is the next step, which is the investment grade audit, turns out from that binder into something like this as an example. Okay, this is one proposal. This is an investment grade audit. The preliminary proposal for this one, Bob, we're going to is this. Okay, so to your point, we really take a very comprehensive approach on this. It's going to be about 4 months, maybe possibly 5 months to work with the administration, your maintenance staff, your facility managers, your janitors, your teachers, meters. We're going to install meters everywhere. This proposal here, I think I installed over 700 meters, light meters, KW meters. Measure all your runtime on all your equipment. And there's a section in there that's called site data. We take all that site data, and all that gets rolled into the calculations. Okay, and you'll obviously review all that with us and make sure at the end of the day that this project that you're going to sign up for is a project that you want, not necessarily what Constellation wants. And we're going to work together on really dialing in the right project for the school district.
Okay, so now you open up a couple more things as you talk there, but that's good. Requirements, you talk about the administration, how much time, or the maintenance guys, how much time, or the teachers, how much time. That last one really strikes a little note because, we've increased our workload this year just by adding students in the classroom. What are we expecting, let's detail out, what are we expecting those teachers to do in that classroom?
Yeah, I don't think teachers would be something that I would be very concerned about. That's something where we usually get them maybe at the end of the day when the class has moved out and maybe ask them a couple of quick questions, okay? Just about how they operate the classroom. It's usually a 10-minute, 15-minute conversation. But you're right. What we are going to need is a commitment from really facility staff. Usually what they do is they provide us with a lead project manager, if you will. Their maintenance supervisor is usually the person that works with us. And we will have usually we do bi-weekly meetings where we all sit down at the table with your engineer on record, your architects, and obviously your maintenance staff. Every 2 weeks sit down in a formal meeting to talk about what we saw out there in the field. We're going to need escorts to bring us to each facility, bring us in the mechanical room, things like that. But what we see, that's pretty standard operating procedure for all schools as they bring contractors in, and nothing different than what you probably do now with your contractors.
No, especially if it's that way. Your
Right.
discussion with your teachers, though, now I'm going to go back and focus there. So you're asking them questions on how they do a classroom. Is that directly connected to the classroom that they were in that day, or is it in any classroom that they would be in? Because, you know, if they get reassigned, they get moved around, we do things where they're from building to building and everything else. So what they tell you today may not pertain tomorrow.
Correct.
So if you did something in a classroom that was specific for what one teacher told you, and tomorrow you have a different teacher in there, that would obviously cause a concern.
Sure. We just gather as much information as we can from all the stakeholders. And again, you know, working with the teachers, trying to figure out, it's really the hours of operation in the classroom, things like that as we go through our schedule. We want to try to really tighten up the schedules on all your HVAC equipment, things like that. So those are the kind of questions we'll probably be asking a teacher. And that should be pretty standard throughout.
I was going to say that, or even the room utilization charts ought to give that to you, especially when you get to like a high school or whatever, because there the room utilization, it tells you which rooms have been assigned to whom, and
Sure.
at that time you know the times and everything in them.
And there's some other questions that are similar between faculty, teachers, and facilities. You know, one of them is comforting. I heard a couple of things today relative to comfort. We want to understand, are there areas of the building that are challenging, right? Whether it's just heating, cooling. And some of it's just the nature of facilities, so we recognize that. But asking that question now allows us the opportunity to really start to hone in and do the diagnostics around, okay, well, why is that problem here? Is it something downstream? And is it something that is, you know, easily corrected, or is it just a system issue? And then you work through that. So those are some of the questions that we'll start to ask.
Let's take one of yours as an example.
Sure.
The temperature in a room. You have a room that is basically facing south. And the teacher, you know, the windows are there, you know, we have the glass that we have and everything. And the teacher is on the over here by where the thermostat is, and where that's set at and everything, it's 69 to 70 degrees. When they walk onto the other side of the room, it depends which season it is. Okay, like right now, it may be up to 78 to 80 degrees over there. They have actually a 10-degree swing in the temperature. Unless you're going to start changing ducts. How do you start to approach that, or is that part of it, changing ductwork?
Well, I think the big piece of that is part of that's just the nature of the room. So there's some things that you're not going to be able to address, and there's some comfort issues that are a challenge to address, and it's the nature of the building. And when you start to think about infrastructure changes, that's a whole different, significantly deep cut. So I think you're going to take each of those cases as they come. Some of them we may have to have a discussion that says, unfortunately, there's not a really structured fix for this. It is somewhat the nature of the business. In other cases, it could be better control over that room. Maybe the room flow isn't optimized. We can look to do that. So you're going to take each case as they come. One of them may be a window tint if there's a lot of internal
Solar shades.
Yeah,
We
solar
installed
shades.
solar shades for that scenario.
So those would be some of the types of recommendations that could fall into these costs.
Correct.
So
So we ran into that exact scenario that you talked about, where we actually put solar shades in, and they actually have a sensor where the sun, once the sun reflects on that window and there's a heat buildup, the solar shades will actually automatically come down and shade that area. So
Okay.
we've done, we implemented, ECMs like that. And there's an energy savings component to that, obviously, because you're removing that heat load from the room.
Right. No, I understand that. As I said, that's why I was wondering how far you go or where you go with it, because, I mean, I've been in some of the designs where we've actually decided where we were going to, or how many drops we were putting in a room to drop air in, and how it was moving the air out and everything based on where the openings were and everything. And,
But your point is well taken. It's also the census. I mean, we need to get right down to the point where how many, administrator, male, female, okay, and your population throughout the school. How many female students you have, how many male students you have. That is a calculation that we're going to use in our water calculation, okay? So these are all the things that we're going to need to know. We need to know the population of each one of these schools.
What I want to just talk for a second, which I didn't bring up, I don't know to the new board members, I brought it up about 2 years ago in the original proposal, after the project. If they come in, they do it, they go back home. What we talked about in the research I've done, Constellations and the other groups that we did RFQs and RFPs with were all vendor-neutral companies. And that was important, if you remember when I brought it up, because when you have a Johnson & Johnson or Siemens or something, they'll give you the savings, give us the best deal, and this and that. But then when they leave, the hidden cost is when they got to come back to repair controls, or repair this or that, you have to go through them. So being that the companies we looked at for RFQs and then RFPs and now Constellation at the end are vendor neutral, so they're not obligated to use Seaman Controls or this one or that one, they can actually get us the best deal. But what's more important than that is they actually train Mr. Case and his maintenance staff so that when things happen, we don't have to get on the phone and call somebody to come in and do it. Where, and I believe you leave stuff back for them.
We do.
So our maintenance guys can actually do a lot of the repairs or something goes wrong themselves. So we're not stuck in a service contract. So that's afterward. I just want to make sure I was clear on that as well. That's another.
How long is the warranty good for?
Depends on the measure. So the performance warranty, the savings warranty is for the term of the agreement. And then each of the pieces of equipment that are installed are going to have their own warranty associated.
Here's what I'm asking. Going back to some of the lighting, I had lighting done in an organization. They got the lighting in and everything. And the company had to come back 9 months later and rip out all the lights and put brand new lights in. And they did. They didn't say, well, it's your maintenance guys that have to do it. They had to do it because they were covered by that. Are you covered? Is
Yes.
that covered?
Yeah. Well, I don't know the reason they had to rip them out. But
They weren't
if it was-
performing.
Okay.
The ballasts were going.
If that's, yeah, that's correct. And we actually had that on a project. We had a project where ballast came, it was a hospital project, I remember the project, and the ballasts were failing. We went to the manufacturer, we came in, and we were the district's advocate, and we said, these are failing, the company paid, so the ballast manufacturer paid to have those replaced.
And on these lighting technologies now, you're getting up to a 5-year warranty on a lot of these lighting products now. Because of the hours of operation now. An LED light now is going up to almost 60,000, 80,000 hours
Right.
now. And
Right.
guaranteeing that.
But the problem was fixing it. If our guys had to do the maintenance on it, it was all our cost as compared to being part of the cost of the people that installed it. And so you're right. Okay, if the company went back and stood behind it, that's an important factor. This is a 20-year deal, I take it, to pay back?
The legislation allows you for 20 years, that's correct. So that's the current legislation. And one other piece I don't think I mentioned was, although when we get done with the project, we've moved on, there's a guarantee, but that's not the last you'll hear from us. So we will provide you an annual report of savings. So you'll see, maybe not myself, but you'll see someone, maybe not Ken, but someone from our organization will be required during that period of time for the project to come back to this board and others to report out on the performance of the project. Now, it's up to the board if you want to hear that, or if you'd like us to send it in to Mr. Simonetti, he can present it to the board. But on an annual basis, we will generate a performance assurance report to show you the proposed savings and where we are relative to that performance. And you'll see that at the board level. And what's nice is it's not only energy units and dollars, but it's also environmental impact. So we're going to be able to demonstrate for you any environmental impact associated with avoiding greenhouse gases. So you'll have that as a data point as well.
Tell me the advantage, okay? Some of this stuff we can go through and we know we should be fixing it. I mean, it's just like we got done with doing March and we hear that, well, there's some things we still could have done more efficient in March and everything. What's the advantage of using you to do it instead of our guys just doing the work?
With them doing it, we're not paying for it.
Well, either way, we're paying.
But they guarantee the savings, so we're floating the bond, they pay it back. If we pay ABC Construction to do it, we just pay out the money and that's it.
And we don't have a guarantee.
Right.
That's the key.
And one other, I think, is a big, and I don't know if this board's experienced it, but under the legislation, we're also required not to have change orders. So under this design build process, we are mandated not to have change orders. So when we bring a number to the board, and if that number is, I'm going to use as an example, the $4.7 million, as long as the scope doesn't change, there's a decision made to add a building, we have to perform for that $4.7 million. So, and how can we do that? Because it is a design build process. So someone had mentioned, I think Mr. Simonetta mentioned the early on finger pointing. Unfortunately, we have no one to point the finger at except ourselves during that implementation.
That's why I wanted to bring that out right from the get-go. Plans and specs, that's where you come in with the change orders, design build. Not only is the energy savings guaranteed, but what's even more important to me is the price is guaranteed. But obviously, we got to go through that comprehensive process to get there.
And again, before we ask if there's any other questions, what we're looking to do at the end of the month is vote on, do we go with the investment grade audit? And then we come back again and we go with the investment grade audit and, we vote again on bonds, we vote on going forward and this and that. So I just want to be clear on, we're we're only at another step.
So if we go through with the investment grade audit, we get all the reports. We own that at the end of it.
We do.
Absolutely.
And, speaking with Arif and things and Josh, they will also, with Bob, go around and look at different things, point different things out as well. But, how do I say it? It's, they're doing the work, right? They're the professionals, but it's pretty much ours. We're telling them what we want them to look at, what building, what this, what that. So we're almost creating the
Your own
spreadsheet
plan.
that you're going to use,
Correct,
our own
correct.
plan to go through, so.
This is the board's and the district's project, so there are going to be things that we uncover as we go through this analysis, that as we sit down with administration and we present, they may just say, that's a great idea, but we just don't want to go there today. And that's acceptable. We understand that that's part of the process, but we're going to bring you a holistic project back, and you're going to be able to select the scope that best fits your needs. And what we hear a lot from our partners on the facility side when we're in buildings is, you're exactly right. They know there's things that need done. Unfortunately, they're traditionally understaffed, so they're just trying to keep the lights on that day while kids are in the classroom, and trying to manage fires there. And the second is they really get caught up with these expensive Band-Aids. So they know that this piece of equipment needs replaced. But getting capital to replace it is very challenging. So the path of least resistance is, let's Band-Aid it. Let's put a Band-Aid. And I call them the expensive Band-Aids because you don't have an option not to let that boiler run. It has to run. So we're going to keep it running one way or the other. And we really if you look at deferred maintenance within K through 12 facilities today, not only here in the Commonwealth but across the country, it continues to escalate because districts like yourself are trying to do more with less, and you're trying to put as many dollars as you can closest to that student, and sometimes the infrastructure suffers. And this is a vehicle to help you address those infrastructure.
Well, I think you just touched on it right there, too. The other is, you don't always have the cash or whatever. We're providing the cash through the savings and everything to cover it because really it's working it through the bond issue. And so out of that also, that includes whatever your fees are for doing,
That's correct.
so you're commissioning on it.
Correct, that's all listed in here.
Is there any other questions for the gentleman before we sit down? Seeing none, thank you guys
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
You guys can hang around for a few more minutes, I just have a couple questions not pertaining. All right. Is there any public that would like to be heard on buildings and grounds agenda items only? You look familiar.
Yes, I'm still John Kennedy. And I would say it's been you've had a great conversation tonight, and I actually appreciate that. I read, what concerns me is the vestibules in particular. I read a newspaper article indicating that they were somewhat behind schedule and somewhat over budget. And I know that they're going to be finished. I know you're going to do that. And I know a lot of people are going to feel good about them until they start thinking about what else might have been done with that money. And then there may be some, people feeling not quite so good. But the latter part of the article concerned me more, and that was a question of, I guess it was security or police officers or peace officers in more buildings. And I got to thinking, it's such a nice picture of this kindly old man wandering the building, heading off trouble by sensing problems before they happen.
Sounds like superintendent.
Well, I was saying that rather than a kindly old man with a gun doing that or in a uniform, you might be better off thinking about an assistant principal. If you're really talking about security, that person's much more likely to know what's happening in the building and to be able to head off trouble than a peace officer. And in case you're wondering if I've been there, I have talked with the policeman outside my room, so I've seen both situations, and I think in Easton, specifically in Easton, sometimes you have to have that kind of security. But I don't think that's the case in your elementary schools here, so I would strongly recommend you use your money for something else, another teacher, a couple aides, going to get more out of it in a lot of different ways from mine, and that's just my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
And that newspaper article you read, Mr. Miller, was that you, Rudy?
Well, I read something, but I hadn't read
It was
anything
Rudy.
going over budget.
It was Rudy.
Yes, not everybody.
Rudy, we're never over budget when you write it. All right, is there, Mr. Etchison, would you like to speak on agenda items for buildings and grounds?
Yeah.
It's 10 o'clock. Yeah. Sun's ain't already started already.
In listening to the overview in terms of the energy savings project, I have to applaud you on getting it to this level. This is something we looked at some time ago, and it's really neat to see some very professional sounding gentlemen come in and put together what sounds like a really solid program. And so I applaud you guys in terms of getting that done. I think some great questions in terms of lumens were asked and all those other sorts of things, and it sounds like they're doing all the right things, and particularly as you think about examining the bond portion of this, I think it's all very, very solid. So I couldn't be more supportive. I'd like to hear a little bit more about it, but it looks terrific, and I just got to say thanks. I think it's great.
And for the new board members that don't know, even before we were elected, Mr. Etchison was involved in trying to get energy plans in the district for over 5 years. So we spoke on the phone this weekend, and Mr. Etchison to come out and then to hear this, I value his opinion because he has a lot of experience with this. So for you to agree as well,
No, it's great stuff.
Thanks a lot.
I think it's always the most important step is to make sure that what you've got in place is costing you the least amount of money possible, and they're doing all the right things in terms of that. I was particularly happy to hear him kicking in terms of the use of the sun blocking shading and whatnot. I actually went on a tour at Lutron and heard about some of the latest technology they've got on that, just because I'm a geek and I like that stuff. And so I was really happy to hear him talking about that. So it sounds like they're totally in touch with all of the latest and greatest gadgets that can save the district money, which is always a great thing. And I'd be shocked if the savings weren't more than what the guarantee is already talking about. So anyway,
Thank
that's
you.
my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else from public? We don't have much public here. All right, so just to do a recap, obviously on letter A, they don't need a vote or anything, so we wish them good luck in moving forward. Letter B was just an update. Letter C was an update of some good news.
That's going to be on the agenda to approve the change.
All right, we're going to move that ahead. I apologize. We're going to move that ahead to the end of the month. Letter D was the update on the energy savings project. Again, I'll echo Mr. Hutchinson. I thought we had some great conversation. And we're going to move that ahead as well to be voted on at the end of the month. That's my summary. We're going to go to finance. I believe that.
Now, it depends how fast this goes. We could be done quickly.
Well, then if you're done before I get back from the bathroom, which I doubt, we have executive session after this. We have executive session.
So I have a yes vote for these two items for you, Frank?
People want to say it again?
I have a yes vote for these two items for you?
Let Bob walk through it.
Okay, let's see how fast you can get through it, Michael.
Well, there are all questions. First thing is the bus video recording replacement. I think we talked about this, again, a lot of this project we talked about for some time, and some other things came up with priority, like settling the budget and those items. But we're trying to get this stuff back on the table and implement it. We've talked about the lack of video recording on most of our buses. We are down to a small percentage of buses that have actual digital recording. Others have VCRs that we cannot by tapes for anymore. We're using tapes. We're put ourselves in a position now of not doing anything for years. where we're switching buses or trouble buses, make sure they have video capabilities and stuff like that. So I went out and got proposals, and I will send you guys a formal listing. The last proposal came in today with the number. I knew it wasn't going to be the lowest proposal, but I had to wait for the numbers. But anyway, what I'm presenting to the committee, in hopes of moving forward, is a proposal to retrofit all of our 95 buses with new state-of-the-art digital recording equipment. We will also have Wi-Fi capabilities once they're on our property and on our network, so we don't have to wait for a download and a disk to get to the building principal to look at what happened. We can attack things right away. As I said, it's 95 buses we're going to retrofit. The total cost of the project is just over $142,000. So the equipment cost is $106,000. Installation is $28,500, and just the one-time Wi-Fi setup is $7,500, totaling $142,000. What I'm proposing to the board is that, although I don't like to pay interest, I don't have $142,000 in the budget. I'd like to finance that over 2 or 3 years. And we'll be paying for that with some contracted services, some money we have in there for digital recorders and maintenance and stuff on the buses that we hope we will do. This is also, I need to mention, this is PEPM. It does not have to be bid, PEPM pricing. Thank you for that. So, my suggestion or my recommendation to the board, as I said, although I don't want to do it, the difference in total cost from financing over 2 years to 3 years is about $2,000, and it would better suit our budget needs going over a 3-year lease. Again, one other thing I need to point out, we are in a little bit of a quandary with liability issues, with whether we're protecting our students, our drivers, our staff. If something happens with our deductible, in a liability case, one bad case could pay for more than half of this project. So I just want to throw it out there. I want to ask support from the board to move forward. I would again provide you all the details in writing with all the prices, and see what your thoughts are.
If you're PEPM pricing, why the difference in the prices, except for the installation? Is that it, just
Well,
the
I want to get
installation?
other prices. The little contractor is the PEPM, but sometimes you will get lower prices, and if I got a lower price than PEPM, then I have to go out and bid.
Okay.
Mike, this couldn't be classified as capital expense?
Under our debt money? I don't believe so. I think that was borrowed for a specific purpose, but I guess I
Yep.
can question.
Well, maybe fall under the.
Well, we can certainly take it out of capital reserve.
Right, well, that's what I'm saying.
The board can change that up anytime they want. And what you'll save is about, by taking it all out now, and again, reducing that fund balance of capital reserve, you're saving about $9,000.
Is this an audio?
Yes. We'll have 2 cameras, we'll have audio.
We got an audio policy up to date, the requirement of the law to have a policy.
Other questions?
Well,
Yes, I have.
what was the cost for the cameras in the buses?
142,000.
144?
142, it's 95 buses. Now, what they would do if authorized for this, they would come in as soon as we approve it, and 3 to 4 weekends, they'll have everything installed.
I think we should hop right on it. We should have done this a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I do, for the reasons that I mentioned.
Okay, other questions? No. We're okay, we'll move that one on, but
What I would like
go to number
do is,
2?
Get this information to you, get the actual contract, give it to the attorney for review, And are we okay to put it on the agenda?
On the agenda. You're going to send a copy of the contract and everything out with all the dollars? Okay. Okay, moving on to item 2.
Item 2. Again, transportation. This is just a concept that came up, and I want to bring it out to you and, again, see how you're feeling this. We currently, we're using all our vehicles. We currently have 3 vans, 10-passenger vans that are in use every day. We have a contract with Jennings that transports 1 student to Reading area. It's a settlement agreement, that's where they're going. That student will probably be there for another 5 years. That cost to us is about $450 a day, just for the transportation. What I'm proposing is that we can do it with our own driver, but we need some vehicles. So what I'm looking at doing, again, is buying a van or multiple. And I would limit it to the cost that we're saving, the cost that we're spending each year for this student, which is about $80,000. And I would limit the annual expense to that number. And we can buy 1, 2, possibly 3 vans, lease purchase for 3 years, and we can also use those other 2 vans to bring back some of the other contracted services we have.
Mike, a question for you. Why would you do lease purchase if you're having $80,000 a year? Why wouldn't we purchase it
Because I
that
don't
way?
know that because the cost of the driver
Yep.
and 1 van, let's just say, rough estimate, $50,000. That $80,000 is not going to make up the second van.
Okay.
I mean, I could do it the following year, but then I would like to get, we started working with the departments, to get a list of all of the students that go in vans or special areas that we can do that. And I would, again, look, before I want to go with 2 or 3 vans, I would find out again what we can bring back first and see that. So, again, it's a concept I just wanted to bring up tonight.
So at this point, you're just starting the middle of research. There's nothing to bring up next week for voting.
There isn't for voting, because it'll take me a little more time, but I do want to move on, at least this Reading interpretation, at least by 1 van, and that will probably come in October, for the October meeting.
So we'd have the October committee meeting and then that. Does anybody have a problem that he continues to research and come back with numbers in October?
I just think we should be able to see that it gets better, it's going to be good for us.
You're
Start
good.
bringing the stuff back to the district.
You're good. So next one.
Okay.
Next one
I'm
is
next.
the beach job.
Good late evening. Okay, very quickly. Carol Liddy, the band director for Eastern Area High School, approached me last month and said that Mrs. Trajano, and she is in charge of the Trajano Foundation, wants to provide the music program with $5,000 as a gift. So according to policy number 702, gift scholarships and donations, I need to ask your permission to move this forward. I just, very brief, do you want to just, yes? Okay, that's fine.
Sounds good.
You don't have to tell you that, I'm good with that.
No, I have a question with this.
Yes.
Why are we not directing them towards the foundation? Because there's advantage is in a way for the foundation that they actually see those dollars coming in and distributing it.
Right, he has a,
And you know, because when they come in there, they can designate it for that purpose.
And they
So
also would be, they get the exemption.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, which they get through us too, but so
They would
why?
get it, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So why isn't, you know, any of this that comes up anymore should be directed towards the foundation?
Foundation, first of all, I think it's safe to say that the donor preferred that it go through the same process that other gifts have gone through. I called Kathy Miller to talk to her about this because they adopted a policy where gifts to the foundation over $1,000, there's a 10% deduct for give it for the foundation for the purposes of administration and so costs.
Wow.
So, I talked to her today, and I think that since this is coming from a foundation to if it were coming from a foundation to a foundation, that our foundation board would waive the fee.
Oh,
That's what
okay,
she
good.
said,
Okay,
which changes and
Yeah.
may alter this.
okay, I did.
Since when did we have a fee attached to gifts that were?
Well, it's their board, we're going to test for it, we have to say.
That policy, the gift policy.
No, but it must be written in their original.
No,
No.
this was
They can change it.
addition.
They're complete autonomy to.
They do what they want. Mr. Vandenberg.
He's not there.
Oh, you're not there? Mr. Boucher?
Who is it?
Anybody but me?
We're pointing this way. What on this?
Oh, my goodness.
Well, I mean, you know, nothing to do about what they do.
No.
There's nothing, no.
I understand wanting to get the full dollar through, but I think, John, we
Why
have to
isn't-
try to promote people to go that route. I mean, that's why it was set. In the past, they didn't use it because it wasn't there, and that's the only downside. And there are advantages because as foundations report and everything, and they look like additional dollars, there's additional advantages to go through them.
Did she say she could waive the fee for this?
Yeah, she indicated
Okay.
this afternoon that she felt that might be appropriate.
Okay. I would think that the donor would be fine with that if the fee is waived. The money is appropriated according to Carol Liddy. I have that, that's in our report as well.
And I think the majority of the people here representing the school district would think that it would be appropriate that that fee would be
I
waived
agree.
also.
Yeah. Because, I mean,
And
bottom
Dominic,
line.
if you could just at your next meeting with them, just get some background information and get some more,
Yeah.
you know, where you can bring back to us at the next meeting, or, you know, so we can, because that's, I mean, obviously, they don't have to tell us what they're doing, but that's still like quite a shocker. That's
Well,
like pretty much all
I mean, the point would be that, if I was to donate, I would be thinking twice about going through that foundation if that was what I realized was going to occur.
At that rate of money, yeah. I mean, we have to understand, they do need funds to operate, just like we do. And I mean, you know what, that's a real thing there too. Okay, they want to give $5,000, so Mike's time doesn't cost us anything. The bookkeeping that he does, it doesn't cost us anything. So I guess, Mike, we should relook at your salary or something. But really, seriously, 10% may not be the right number, but I understand they're a foundation that operates on their own. But you know what? Even money that comes in through here, there ought to be something that says, hold it. We have a cost for doing business.
But like Kerry mentioned,
But that's
even though they operate on their own and they're charging 10% for administrative fee, but we pay a salary for the person there, so.
No, Frank. See,
Not anymore?
we gave them, and they have a loan from us that they owe us back. They have to pay that person out of the monies that they collect. Just like we pay Michael, that's what I'm saying. The same way we pay Mike, they have to pay their person.
Their dilemma is that they are, I think it's fair to say that their startup has been now for almost 1 year, and however, their ability to raise money and to generate giving, it's going to take longer than a year to get that rolling, and so they're very concerned because her employment, if you will, or her survival there as the director is based on our willingness to support that organization, support her role as executive director. And I think they're looking at the reality that at some point in time, they need to become, be able to function on their own with her and with their costs. So the intent is a positive one. There's also some strong feelings on the part of that board related to giving and what the gifts should be used for and so forth and so on. So I can only say to you or caution you to remember that they're trying to move through this, and they felt it was important for gifts of a certain size or more to have that kind of attachment.
All right.
No.
No, it's your committee. I'm giving it
Oh,
to you.
I'm sorry. I think that takes us through this. Public to be heard on,
Well, I just need approval, well, that's at the end, that we move this forward to the full board.
well, I think it's going to come back to if they waive it, then it's just a matter they go through the foundation and we're done.
So I don't have to bring it to the next full board meeting?
No.
Okay, well, I would like to publicly thank the late Dr. L.L. Trujano and his wife. He was a 1943 graduate of Easton High School, was in the band on the football team, et cetera. And they have donated,
Yes.
very generous. They have donated to our teachers in the past, sent them to Williamsburg, so I'm very appreciative. And I will be calling her and maybe giving her,
We will
some-
thank them. I mean, I think the
Okay.
board should be thanking
I was going to
them.
honor her at the next board meeting, but
Yeah, she can come to the next board meeting. We'll acknowledge it. I think
can we do that possibly?
I think, you got to watch as you get into that, though, the consistency of it, because if not, the next person that gives $1,000 and we don't acknowledge it gives $1,000 to a foundation or
I wanna
whatever,
know.
and we don't,
I mean, in my opinion, if you make a donation to the district, we can take 2 minutes to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think,
but you want to think about how you're going to do it, because, I mean, that can become something that's going to be a continuous basis.
well, Dominic, if you can let Ms. Miller know and her group that, to keep us informed, so we can,
So we come in here one night and you have 300 people that did something, now you got to start to acknowledge 300 people.
well, I mean, hopefully,
And that's not a joke.
No, I know it's not, but hopefully they'll be more diligent in getting us the names faster so we don't have a backlog of 300 people.
No, I'm saying, depending when it comes in, I know what I'm seeing otherwise, and that's what you just have to think about.
300
so.
people donate to the school district, we're going to thank every one of them. We sure can use it, so that's a bad problem to have.
Well, yeah, why wouldn't you?
That's not a bad problem to have.
Yeah, it's a
But
good
no,
one to have.
you let the problem is you let the foundation is really the respective place that
Yeah, but
receives
it's
the
not
money
going
to
to
do
the
it.
foundation. This one's
Well, no,
going to
it
the
may.
school district.
That's what he just said. They're going to waive the fee.
Yeah.
Well, we can discuss who's going to thank you later. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
I'll be looking for the report from John and Mary.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
Okay. Anybody in the public that would like to talk on these subjects? Nobody. Okay. Moving on. So it looks like number 1 moves on. Number 2 comes back next month. Number 3 is if the foundation doesn't do it, we will do it. And that completes the summary.
All right.
Excellent.
Before we adjourn, board members, if you can please, because it's late, come right into the executive session. We have to finish what we didn't get to earlier. And also, I would be upset with myself if I didn't mention this. Bob Fainal, who we learned tonight is also a licensed electrician, he is being recognized and awarded by the PSBA for his 28 years of service to the school board. Over in Wilson, to Easton, I think we know where he came from, as far as but also, I'm willing to rent a van from thinking if we all want to go up when they award him. I think that'd be nice if
Was this out? Where's it at?
Up at
You don't even know where you're going.
I
Wait, can we use those
When?
fans? When's it gonna happen?
They just sent me the email. I just got it.
When is it?
I'll pull it up when we get to that.
Oh, yeah.
Get a van. We're good.
So, I think, if anybody wants to go, let me know before I run the van. I mean, he's not going to give them 28 years of service. So. Thank you very much, Bob, for your help.
Hey, Bob.
If there's no objections, I'll take a motion to
Frank,
adjourn.
hey Frank, public to be heard on non-agenda?
Oh, yes, anybody, not agenda items, Mr.
You
Kennedy.
know it's on the bottom of the list.
If you like to talk about Bob, if you want to tour the buildings with the energy people with Bob, then well. Can I have a second? Second. All those in favor?
Wait, I moved it. Wait.
Aye. Second, aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned. Please come right into